what I am philosophically. I'm a Stoic. If something happens to me, I just go on. And, it just, get up, dust yourself off, and, go on.
Well, Jack, thanks for coming on the show. I really want to spend some time talking a little bit about the humble beginnings that you started at in Germany, and you were a chemistry and a math teacher, but then something happened and you got recruited by the KGB. So let's just start with, what was that like growing up in Germany?
Yeah, start with the humble beginnings. I was born 4 years after World War II. Germany was still suffering from the war, and East Germany was suffering more than the rest of Germany because this is where the Russians moved in, and they didn't treat the Germans very kindly. It's not a surprise. I mean, they had been raped, pillaged, and killed, so they came back, and there were a lot of situations where women got raped. And with regard to the economy, whatever they hadn't destroyed on the way to Berlin, if it was usable, they took it out of the country. So it took a long time to recover from that. I had the good fortune, believe it or not, to grow up in the country, because the rations, the food rations for city dwellers, for everybody, were below sustenance. You would lose weight on purpose based on how much food you were allocated. Now, if you lived in the country, you just play nice with the folks who grow the potatoes and the carrots and all that, and you also had the ability. We had chickens. My grandfather, who was a janitor at a high school, he had pigs and goats. so we had a little more food regardless. There's a picture of me when I was 12 years old. I was like a long, thin, like pole, totally emaciated. Looked like that's horrible. And we were sick a lot because we were malnourished, and the majority of our food came out of potatoes fundamentally, and and there wasn't really medication available. For instance, the first time I went to the dentist and they drilled my teeth, there was no Novocaine. We had no Novocaine. Okay, and I had a lot of strep throat, at least once a year, very often twice a year, and as a result, I had to have my aortic valve replaced several years ago, simply because the bacteria that cause strep throat, they also lodge themselves in the valve and make it arthritic. So the thing is though, we didn't know that we were not doing well because nobody else was. So we were all poor. There was some presents around Christmas, and there was typically only one that I liked. The rest was stuff that I needed, clothes and stuff like that. If I got a soccer ball, that was made me delirious. We played a lot outside. We were free range kids. The one thing I got to tell you was really good about growing up in a communist type environment. It was a police state. There was very little crime. So our parents had no problem with us running around in the dark outside. We went to school by ourselves. So we were fundamentally not protected because there was no danger coming at us from anywhere. Which, I tell you what, this has had a very strong influence on my outlook on life, because I sort of always knew that things would turn out okay. So, and when you go into life with that kind of an attitude, you typically will make it happen. If you think, all the things that could go wrong, they will go wrong. So that was one of the reasons that I actually agreed to become a secret agent, because I had no idea what I was signing up for. I was completely stupid that way. I thought I knew, but it turned out to be completely different. But it was dangerous. I could have wound up in jail. I could have possibly gotten killed. But when you know that you won't fail, you won't fail.
Wow, that's powerful. And my late friend Stefan Arnio wrote a book, Hard Times Create Strong Men. And he talks about that in there, that, back when men and women went through hard times, they grew up differently. They didn't have the fears that we have today. Maybe they did, and things were dangerous, but they just didn't grow up with that because they were hardened because of their surroundings and because of the environment they grew up in.
Yeah.
And I think times today are very much the opposite end of that spectrum,
Oh
where
yeah.
we have a lot of weak men and weak women because you've grown up in easy times. I
Right.
mean, we don't have to go to a farmer and negotiate for potatoes or, have livestock to eat. We just go to the grocery store, but
Right.
we take that for granted as if it's never going to end, and it could end just like that.
I
And
uh, I just came up with how to describe the United States of today. You take your pick. We're either fat, dumb, and happy, or fat, dumb, and angry. That's who we are. I mean, it's a uh, there are not too many sort of normal people anymore, particularly if you let them loose on social media. Ugh. But I have a lot of normal friends, I must tell you. So there's enough around. If you can, if you look for them, you can find them.
well, the good thing is we get to pick and choose who we
Yeah.
spend our time with. I mean, not everybody has to be our friends. I often tell people I'm not searching for new friends. I mean, I have a few, and they're good people. They have my same beliefs, and that's who I spend my time with. And I'm sure the same is true for you, because you can
Yeah.
find evil. You step outside your network, there's evil everywhere, but you
Oh,
got to look for
absolutely.
it.
And I'm suffering from actually would-be friend overloads. People come to me because I get exposure, and there's a lot of people when I talk with them. I got to say, I like you, but I don't know if we can have a relationship because a relationship requires time, and I have only so much. So you can't have a superficial relationship with 100 people. I'd rather have a deep relationship with 10.
Your life becomes more fulfilling when you do that as well. When
Yes.
you go for the masses and you try to appease everybody by saying yes to everybody that wants to be your friend, the problem is when you say yes to everybody, you never have the opportunity and the time to say yes to the right ones.
This is the primary reason I believe that star athletes and star actors uh, wind up being very shallow and sort of not very well adjusted when it comes to real life, because they don't have what normal people should have, a deep relationship with others, because we're wired to be herd animals. We're not wired to be uh, islands.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, everybody that comes to them when they reach their superstardom, and you're one of the most popular people out there right now. Everybody wants your time because you hold some knowledge that everybody wants the secret answer as to
Yeah.
why is Putin and why is Russia doing what they're doing. But on this interview we talked offline, I sort of just want to get to know, who is Jack? What was it like growing up? And you went from your humble beginnings where you just went out and you played and you did things kids did. You maybe didn't have things, but you didn't know you went without. That was just the
Yeah,
norm.
no, I cut branches off a tree to make myself a hockey stick. All
That
right.
actually sounds fun to me, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and then I hit the soccer ball with a hockey stick, and I hit it against the wall, and I played goalkeeper. So there was a lot of. I didn't have neighbors' kids within walking distance, so I had to invent a lot of games that I could play by myself. And when I could, I started reading. I read a lot. I read, all the Brothers Grimm fairy tales from beginning to end. But later on, middle school, when we started having history, we got the history books before school started, about a week or so. By the day school started, I had finished the history book. So I was always curious, trying to find things out, and that curiosity actually got me to where I am today, because I did well enough in school, so I wound up in high school, which was not, it was limited to about 10% of the top students. And then when I decided that I actually wanted to study because I wanted to be the best, I became the best, and I went to college and I became the best again. Not necessarily because I was the smartest, but I was very disciplined and I had excellent study habits. You cannot fail when you do what I did. Everything that I knew, and chemistry is a lot of disconnected facts. So you have to memorize a lot of things. Everything that I learned went through my hands. I wrote it down. I never learned from a textbook. I extracted what's important from the book, and then to prepare for a test, I wrote myself down questions for which I could find the answer in my notes. And so I would go through them, and when I didn't know the answer, I would repeat and go through the same questions all over again. So I I killed it. I actually had situations where these were all smart people. Situations where I had an A and the second best grade was a C.
Wow.
It's because of the study habits. I know there's a couple of guys I studied with who are probably more talented, have a higher IQ, but it doesn't matter. It's how you use the tools that God gave you.
We talked offline. I'm an ex-Wall Street guy, and I'm in the money space today. And everybody makes money something that it's not. And really, money's just a tool. Just like you said, it was how you use the tools that are given to all of us. But really, the difference wasn't that you were some brilliant genius. It was just you took the tools and you applied them and used them. And because of that, you rose to the top. You, in your words, killed it. I love that. And that that led you to being, and they always say, and I love this, the student becomes the teacher. And you did exactly that.
Yes, I see. My parents were both teachers. So I actually the first apartment we had was the top level of a school building, and there was no childcare available. So when my mother was teaching class, and I was still in pre first grade, I would sit in the class and just take it in, whatever. I always wanted to be a teacher. I still like telling people what I know, and helping them with the knowledge that I acquired. So that was sort of very natural. I started teaching. When in those days there was a shortage of paid professors. So once we were 3 years into our 5-year study, we had the ability to operate as like adjunct teachers. So I started teaching math at that point, some chemistry, to the freshmen, and that was fun. And I still like doing this. So when I get a chance to speak in public, that I enjoy this very much. Also, it's interesting. So my wife Shauna was. Initially, I hired her as my admin, and she was. I included her in my staff meetings, and she's very opinionated as I am, and she would tell me that I'm not treating these people right. I'm not strong enough a leader because I explained to them every decision that I made, because I had a teaching kind of leadership style. I wanted them to know why I'm doing this so that they could possibly buy in or at least learn from it. And that worked out pretty well for me.
You're pretty well known for that. And you've got a new 12-part series coming out that I'd be remiss not to bring up. It's called The Agent, and it's an audio documentary. And now, when is this coming out?
Oh, no, it's already out there. It was released once a week starting last year in December. You can get to it on all the major streaming audio platforms. It's free of charge.
And it's almost, we were talking, it's the lost art. Everybody lives for the now, and we're so focused on what we're doing today, but we're so focused on the future. But the thing is the future doesn't exist yet. And the only way to really know where we're going is to look at where we've been. And it's actually frightening to me being a history buff and studying history, because I see what happened in the 30s. I see what happened in world wars. I see what happened with the rise of empires and the fall of empires. And I see too many similarities in
Yep.
what's happening today. And, we'll get into the KGB stuff, but like, do you want to comment a little bit about that? Because I know you love history.
It's not pretty at all. I mean, you look at starting as far back as we know, and it's typically right around Rome and ancient Greece.
Mm-hmm.
Man has been killing one another forever and ever, and then you go into the Middle Ages, and all the European countries were constantly at war, and then you get into the world wars, and communism, and all of the evil that man has done to men. We just don't seem to find a way to make a change. I think the American Constitution, as it was constructed, is, in my view, the best vehicle to manage the relationships among men. Unfortunately, we don't live by it anymore.
No, we do not, which is sad. And there's another book that, has a lot about history called the Bible that I think a lot of people fail to live by as well. But that's a whole nother topic for today. But the thing is you grew up right after World War II, and you grew up in humble beginnings, and you saw this, and you became a teacher of mathematics and also chemistry. But then something happened, and all of a sudden you got recruited by the KGB. To me, everybody else just accepts this as just, oh yeah, and the KGB recruited you. But like, there's a break there. How does that happen? You're living in that moment where you're teaching and you're doing the things you love, and then all of a sudden now you're a KGB agent.
Well, you'd be surprised. This is not like nowadays. If you want to join the CIA, you just apply, and then they say, "Yeah, come on in. We'll give you base training, and we'll see if you have the stuff that it takes." I never even had a remote idea of ever doing something like this. To me, that was interesting, and we had our own James Bond, the communist James Bond, who did all the great things and to save mankind, but in the process also did well with the women, and drove fast cars and all that. So, no idea, and I couldn't have applied to the KGB or the Stasi. They recruited the KGB, as far as I knew. I had no idea where they were located. So, and I was initially approached in my third year as a student. So I wasn't
Oh, wow.
an adjunct professor yet, and that was they knew what they were looking for, because it was always about becoming illegal in another country, most likely West Germany, and they were looking for people with a number of important character traits, bright people, and I had, at that point, I had just received a national scholarship that was limited to 100 concurrent holders in the country.
Wow.
So I was a bit of a standout when you look through files, right? I was a party member. I was active in the communist youth movement, and they were looking for things like, obviously I was bright. They were looking for things like the ability to fearlessness, number one. Number two, the ability to adjust to different situations, no problem. Likability, right? There's no such thing as an agent who operates in the realm of humanity, human intelligence, who can be successful if they're not likable, right?
Good point.
And my favorite is, and this came out of a couple of interviews that I found in the media that were given by the ex-heads of the First Directorate Department S, which was illegals, what they were looking for. And one of those character traits was, I love it. It's a well-controlled tendency to be adventurous, something like that. And even as a child, I did things I shouldn't have done. I got injured a lot I climbed trees that I shouldn't have climbed, and I was never afraid of trying something new. You can't find uh, in your files, in your personnel files, you can't find all of these character traits um, addressed. So when I was first approached, I spent a year and a half in an informal relationship with a local KGB agent. You know, we met once, twice a month, talked about life, about everything. He gave me a few tasks, but you know, it was Mickey Mouse stuff, nothing big. And we talked about what it would be like to be an illegal undercover agent. And you know, I can reconstruct it yet now that at one point he decided this guy is good, so we should hire him. And that's when they sent me to Berlin, where I eventually met the head of the KGB in East Germany, who made me the offer. That was I didn't expect it. Like, wow, okay, because up until that point I was just playing, until I became a father. I was just playing life. And so even the informal relationship with that KGB guy, to me, it was just play. I didn't really think about where that might lead or and so when I was asked, can we count on you? Are you going to be part of our organization? I realized, oh, this is serious. And I played a little bit for time. I was telling him, that, I'm not trained and I don't even know. He said, don't worry about it. We'll train you. But we want to work with people who can make a decision quickly. So I give you until tomorrow noon. That made for a sleepless night.
I can imagine.
And fundamentally, because I loved where I was already somebody in that it's a university town with 100,000 people, and 10% of those were students. So the university was like huge, and I was somebody there, right? And I also I was in the starting lineup of the basketball team. Loved basketball. Was my passion. And so this was my home. This was the first time I felt like home in a place. Had I have a girlfriend at that time, a steady girlfriend, I probably would have said no. But that was missing. There was no such anchor. So eventually, what won the day was my wanting to travel, my wanting to have adventure, my wanting to be somebody special. I knew I would be able to break all kinds of laws. I would be in East Germany. I operated in Russia outside of the law already. So all of that, that's very appealing to, a young person like me. And the other thing that I didn't have a mentor, and my father was out of my life, so I couldn't discuss it with anybody. So I said, yeah. I had no idea what I was buying into. And I tell you what, because this is an interesting illustration of I didn't have any idea what I was buying into. So one spring morning, I take a suitcase and a briefcase, get on a train, and go to Berlin. And that's where I meet my new handler. And I figured, I lived in the university town. I had a single room in a dorm with the bathroom and the showers down the hall, and it was really small. The room had the bed and a chair and a table, and it was like really the bare bones. And I figured, hey, I'm going to Berlin and I'm joining the KGB. I'm going to get a really nice apartment. So this is what happened. I meet the fellow in his car, and he says, I have a task for you. That's the first task. Go find yourself a place to live. Now, that was at a time when there was a severe shortage of living space, and was all controlled by the government. You couldn't just go and rent an apartment. It wasn't there. So that was a test. That was a test. I failed this test. I'm out. I found something. What I found was a building that had a bed and a chair and no table.
So you actually downgraded.
Yes, I lived there for about 6 months, and then my new handler finally decided that I was worth keeping, and he brought me a key to an apartment. They had apartments, that. So, as I said, I had no idea what I was getting into. I could have failed very early, very quickly, and would have had to find a way to re-engage in society, my with an interrupted career.
Wow. Now, you mentioned something when you were talking about the traits that they were looking for. You mentioned you
Yeah.
were fearless. What do you think
Yeah.
drove to that fearless, being, because nothing in your past really led to that, at least from hearing it from the outside. Where did the
Well,
fearlessness come from?
as I don't know if I told you this in this interview or when we started talking, I I learned in childhood that there were no threats. I
Right.
learned to trust. I learned to trust the world, and nowadays I know that what I am philosophically. I'm a Stoic. If something happens to me, I just go on, and it just get up, dust yourself off, and go on. Um, and since I had a, a chain, a series of success after success after success, I really trusted in my ability to do anything I I would decide doing. I learned to play basketball. The first time I had a basketball in my hands, I was 18 years old, and I forced myself. For the first year, I participated in basic exercises with kids 12 years old. Uh, I did what I had to do, and anyway, it's I don't have a lot of fear in me. So it's I think it's how you're born, and partially how your young life uh, happens. Contrast, and this is not a criticism at all, but contrast my wife, who grew up in Kingston, Jamaica, in right in the middle of the worst slum there was, where there was nothing but murder, mayhem, and drugs. She grew up knowing that the world is your enemy, and she still operates with that foundation, which makes her. We're very much the opposite. For her, everything is a threat, and for me, everything is an opportunity.
I feel like everybody fears everything, especially since the pandemic. We've been brainwashed by media to be
Oh,
afraid of God, be afraid of the person sitting next to you, be afraid of the person on the plane or on the train. It's almost like fear is instilled in us to, just beware of the everything. And really, those threats, real or unreal, are made up in our head, and we let them manifest. It's almost like a disease where
yeah,
fear just
yeah.
takes over every aspect of our lives. And that's the world we live in today, but very different than the world you lived in. And kind of right back to that book, Hard Times Create Strong Men and Women.
Yeah.
And we're just in easy times.
Fear, in my view, is a more dangerous virus than COVID was and is. It
100%.
it ravages society. It eliminates the glue amongst people, and
What happened next? Like, what was training like, and when did you actually get moved to the U.S.?
yeah, this training was fundamentally all one-on-one. I never once attended a class, and the reason for that is that once I signed up with the KGB, I became a state secret of the Soviet Union. They had to keep me as secret as possible because us illegals were extremely vulnerable.
Mm.
You know, just one hint and you're
That was
busted.
it.
So it couldn't be in. I strongly believe that eventually the person that turned out to be my handler while I was in the U.S. out of Moscow, who made decisions based on what I was supposed to do, and you know, all these, anything that had something to do with me, never met. We never met. He just knew me as by a name, and by a fundamental description as to, you know, what I was capable of, but no idea who I was. So he couldn't give me away, and so I got really good training in what we call tradecraft, encryption, decryption, Morse code, secret writing, counter surveillance, you know, all this stuff that you need to know to operate as an agent. I also was required, and that was actually good, I was required to expand my knowledge of the arts, music, you know, history, just to get more of a foundation of knowledge about in the world, what's in the world. So, you know, they paid for theater tickets and opera tickets and stuff like that. I liked that. And I also was told specifically to buy a TV and watch West German television, which was really not allowed in East Germany. So that was that was another indication that, you know, I was outside the law, so to speak. And then the interesting little tidbit is that the first book they gave me to read was the history of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. I don't know what that had to do with espionage. It didn't help me one bit. The second thing I had to read was the Constitution of West Germany. And then lastly, and this is what eventually got me to the United States, they told me that every agent like me was required to become fluent in another language. And they allowed me to pick the language, and I picked English because I had never had a problem with English in school. So when I learned English, and I threw myself into learning English the way I threw myself into everything else, and within about 9 months, I was passively fluent. In other words, I could read,
Wow.
you know, English novels without a dictionary. And when that got to the attention to the bosses in Moscow, somebody had a light bulb going up. Man, maybe, just maybe, he can learn English well enough so we can infiltrate him in the U.S. as a born American. Wow, that's highly unusual. So I was screened by an American, a lady who was born in the United States and apparently had fallen in love with a Russian and moved to Moscow. That poor woman, she was not very happy in Moscow. And a college professor, and you know, I spent 2 hours talking with them, and their assessment was, one was thumbs up, the other one was thumbs down, and wishful thinking won the day. And I was moved to Moscow for 2 years to study with the American English, so I could speak it well, interact, and also I did a whole lot of phonetics exercises. And here's a talent that I have. I have very good hearing. So simply, if you can't hear it, you can't imitate it, right? And I, even as a youngster, I used to imitate East German comedians, and I had fun doing this. I can still speak in various German dialects, and so I got to a point that, you know, whatever percentage you want to assign to it, the residual German accent was explainable and never was a problem in New York. So in New York, you have all kinds of accents. You have people who were born in New York, in say in Spanish Harlem, who have a stronger accent than I had. So So it worked. So I came here as Jack Barsky, the American, in 1978.
And you spent 10 years
Yes.
as a KGB spy in the US. And what was that like? I mean, were you able to have friends? I mean,
No matter how much training I got, I had no idea what it was like to be an American. Nobody could teach me that, right? The folks that had spent time in the U.S., they were under diplomatic cover. They were diplomats, and they lived in a Soviet compound. They looked at American society from the outside. I was supposed to be in, right? And so I was supposed to know the history of baseball. I was supposed to know football rules. I had to be a fan of a team, and I just simple things in daily life. How do you count? How do you count on your fingers? Do 1, 2, 3 with your hand. So see, and Germans go with the thumb first.
okay, a lot of Americans do that. 1, 2, 3,
Yeah, but you
4,
just went
5.
the index.
I did. I went with
Anyway,
one with the index finger. I never thought about that.
There were so many things that, and I was smart enough to know that I didn't know anything.
Huh.
So I was very careful initially to not get too close to other people. Especially the first year, I didn't even have a job. I existed based on the money that the KGB gave me, and stayed in a hotel where I had to pay about I think it was $600 a month, and I made sure that on a weekday I would leave the hotel around 8 and not come back until 6 in the afternoon, so people had the impression that I had business, that had a job or whatever. And then I got pretty lucky in that I didn't do that on purpose, but it turned out to be very, very good for my ability to become an American. My first job was bike messenger in Manhattan.
Okay.
And messengers, they were all transients. There were very few people who did this forever. And as a bike messenger, I made good money. And I was able to listen to the conversations of the others while waiting in an office, while waiting for another route. And slowly, I sort of got there. And so then I had some short relationships with some women. And then after 3 years, I went to college in the U.S., and in New York, that was like the United Nations. It was like all kinds of people from all kinds of different backgrounds. But when it was 6 years in the making. When I finished college, I was comfortable as an American. I got my first job as a programmer, and I felt there was no more hesitation. Okay, but it took a long time.
6 years. It's a long time.
Oh, by the way, I just need to tell you that because it's hilarious. I graduated college as a valedictorian.
Of course you did. I mean, I think at this point everybody would have just said, "Wow, you didn't," but of course you did.
No, but I shouldn't have done this. This was there was a piece of cultural ignorance because I just was I just wanted to do well, and I actually made it a point to get. I even negotiated some grades up. So, but then I was told to go to the the dean's office, and the dean wanted to talk with me, and he asked me, so what do you think you're going to say at the graduation speech? I said, what speech? Well, you're the valedictorian. Oh shit. I wasn't supposed to be a standout, Thank God the KGB never heard about this. They would have reprimanded me severely for doing what I did there.
So you went on for 10 years doing this and just reporting back the different information and the different tasks that they would ask of you. And then what happened? I mean, when I read your story and I'm thinking you resigned from the KGB, yeah. I'm thinking, how do you actually resign from the KGB? It just seems like that's a lifelong commitment. And if you resign, bad things can happen. I mean, what does that look like?
Yeah, could. First of all, what happened was I got to a point where I joined the human race and discovered my humanity, and this is what happened. So I had a relationship with a young lady, and she became pregnant, and a girl was born, and I watched this girl grow. And this is, what I told you, I became an adult, and I stopped playing when I became a father. And I just absolutely fell in love with this girl. Unconditional love, something that never happened to me before. And so I was trying to figure out, how do I support this girl? One of those days I'm going to have to go back and my time in the U.S. would come to an end. And I hadn't figured this one out. I didn't want to, ask the KGB for help because that would have caused problems for me. So, at that time she was Chelsea was her name. She was 18 months old, and the KGB somehow had reason to believe that I was running into problems and the FBI was about to arrest me. Whatever made them think that, I have no idea, because the FBI was not on my case at that time, quite clearly. So they called me home. They started the pre-arranged emergency procedure. I was supposed to just make a beeline to Canada, and then they would exfiltrate me out of Canada back to the Soviet Union. And long story short, it was after some, playing for time, but eventually I couldn't play for time anymore. So I came up with this brilliant solution. I wrote them a Dear John letter in which I explained that I really can't come because I have HIV/AIDS.
Oh, wow.
That worked.
That worked?
That worked so well. They went to, and I asked them also to give my savings to my German family. And so they actually told my German family I already died. So they bought this hook, line, and sinker. They had no reason to not believe me. They didn't know I had a child. Okay? All they knew was that for me, going back would be great. I had just, the year before, I had gotten the second highest decoration of the Soviet Union. I had like $60,000 in savings on the other side of the Iron Curtain, where there was a fortune. And I would have had the good life for sure. So why not? I mean, they couldn't think of any reason why I would stay. And so my explanation made perfect sense to them, and that was that.
That's
I didn't
incredible.
know that they would believe it, but after 3 months, I felt that I was out of danger, and that I would live out the rest of my life as a undiscovered agent who quit the KGB. Well, that didn't turn out that way either, but that's a good thing.
I've watched a lot of your interviews, Fox and CNN and all those. And it's funny, they just get, a couple quick little things about Russia, Ukraine and Putin and what's happening, but they never get the story. That's incredible. But that's how you did it. I was reading here. I'm like, you resigned. I can't imagine you can just snap your fingers and say, hey guys, I think I'm going to take an early retirement and I'm going to resign. You guys cool with that? And the FBI came knocking. Like, let's talk about that.
Well, it was 9 years after my resignation that the FBI said hello. That was completely unexpected, obviously. I had literally forgotten that I once was a KGB agent. I had a nice career, a house in the country. We had another child, so everything was going well. I made good money, and the only thing I knew I wouldn't be able to do was leave the country, go visit Germany, because I was afraid to apply for a passport, because the first time I did it was denied. So I didn't know whether I was blacklisted, so I just stayed away from that. The reason that the FBI actually knew about me was there was a defector that took a lot of materials, copied materials out of the KGB archives and gave it to MI6, the British intelligence service. And amongst the piles of material, there was my name and the fact that Jack Barsky is a KGB agent, illegal, lives in the northeast of the United States. Had it been Jack Smith, they wouldn't have found me. But Barsky, there was maybe a couple of hundred. And, they quickly determined that the fellow who got his Social Security card at the age of 35 was that should be.
It's a pretty good dead giveaway.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and at this point, initially it was scary because there was no upfront promise that if you work with us, you will be allowed to live on as a free American. No, I knew that was an option, but I didn't know it would happen. It could have easily arrested me and kick my wife out of the country because she was an illegal alien when I married her, and she became a citizen based on
because of you,
me, right? And then the kids would be wardens of the state and all that. So that raced in my head for several weeks until, and that was after I passed a polygraph, until I was told, "You're good. You will continue to work with us to the extent we need you, but there is eventually a path to citizenship."
But it ended up happening. Like, they didn't just tell you. I mean, often you think the FBI and any high level, you think they'll tell you things just to get information, and then it never materializes. But it actually happened.
No, but you see, there was a subliminal understanding that something like this could happen, and I came right out. I said the very first statement I made to them, the very first thing I said was, "What took you so long?" Just to break the ice, but then I said, I am fully aware that the only possible way out of this dilemma for me would be if I cooperate 100% fully, and I have no reason not to. I have a family here, and I'm going to do the best I can to get out of this somewhat whole. And so they knew that was my intent. I passed a polygraph, which is very important for the FBI. And I also was able to actually, after but 14 years, locate emergency documents that I had hidden in a park in the Bronx, and they were still there.
Wow.
I found them. So, and after a while, these agents know people pretty well, right? So they also had a good feel about me. I come across as a very authentic and very honest. I've been told honest to the bone. So it was all going in that direction, thank God. So here I am talking to you.
So here's the thing that comes through my mind. All this is going on, and you're authentic, and you pass the polygraph. So you're on your path to actually being, an American citizen and having all the same rights as any American citizen. Not I don't want to call it the lie, but the lie that you were kind of going under with the KGB. Wasn't there fear? And you don't have fear, but fear is the wrong word. Weren't you worried that the KGB would find out and
but they
react?
wouldn't know that I'm around. I didn't.
So you think they just wrote you off after the HIGP thing? You're gone.
Yeah, and yeah, they wrote me off as a stranded asset. I was dying. This was a death sentence, so they had no clue that I was still around. The first time that they could have had a clue was my 60 Minutes interview. That's when I became a public figure, and at that time, whatever was, the successors of the KGB wouldn't have had me near the top of a list to do harm to. After all, I didn't betray the motherland. I was a German. And it was a long time ago. And if somebody was still alive, who may have felt betrayed personally, they were old. The people that I worked with were older than me, so the chances of me getting in trouble while living in the U.S. or even in Germany and other Western countries were very, very, very low. Having said that, if you promise me $1 million to go visit Moscow, I will say keep your $1 million, because you know there's one thing about Vladimir Putin. He likes to scare people. He likes
He's a
to
scary
scare.
person. There's no question
No, he
about it.
likes he likes to. The reason that he um, uh, uh, engineered that attempt to kill Skripal was to make sure that he was sending a message, right? And he's sending messages all the time. He has no problem having some of his amateur agents being caught, because that raises the question: how many more of them are here?
Mhm.
So, and if I'm in Moscow, I may have an accident, and that sends a message. We get our man no matter what. So
That's a good
that's the
point.
long answer to the question.
No, it's a great answer. I mean, do you ever think about other Russian spies that might be in the U.S. now that are seeing you on Fox or 60 Minutes or any of that, and start thinking, wow, maybe I could get out. Maybe I could, you know,
That's a
whatever it
question
is.
nobody ever asked me. There are others who who are Russian agents, whether they would be diplomats or amateurs, businessmen, students. There are probably hundreds, even a couple of thousand, who are aware of me. It's not Nothing is happening.
Hmm.
And what they might think, everybody, these are personal circumstances. Everybody has different motives to act in a certain way or not. Um, the thing is that if you live in a Western country, you come out of Russia, you live in a Western country long enough, and you live with your eyes open, and you like the way of life here, it gets very tempting to stay, right? And who knows? We will never know. The one of my favorite things to say is, whatever happens in the realm of espionage, the whole truth will never be known, and it will die with the people that have it in their head. Like, is there some things that I have not disclosed? Very, very little, but there's still some things that I've kept to myself.
Yeah, well, it's probably good. I mean, with the family and everything else, I would say that's probably not such a bad idea. And it's just incredible. Like, I'm so glad when we got into this interview that we decided to get to know who Jack was, instead of just talking about, oh, what do you think is going on with Russia Ukraine war and Putin and what's he thinking? And I'm sure you could answer all those, but if people want that, go to Fox News, 60
Yeah,
Minutes, all those.
you don't want me to repeat what I've already said several times. And there's only so much I can say with conviction, because I don't like to speculate.
Mhm.
There's way too much speculation out there. I just read an article that somebody sent me 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. Sent me It's an article written by an American who, I forgot. He has some credibility, and in this article, the person states unequivocally that Russia has won the war and Ukraine is done. Right? And this kind of stuff happens all the time. Is people just want to make an impact, and so they go out and guess, and then other people repeat those guesses, and I don't want to do any of that. So
Yeah.
there's a limited amount of information that I can convey with reasonable certainty, and I leave it at that.
Well, the thing that scares me a little is, not so much that maybe Putin's thing is to create, an empire, or I don't know, the greater Russia, if you will, whatever you want to call her, united Russia. I,
Yeah, no,
I don't,
he stated that pretty openly,
you're right.
and he started this. He became president, I think, in around 2000. And in 2004, he had an interaction with who was it Condoleezza Rice or something? And he complained openly and that there's a lot of Russian people in other countries, and they're being suppressed. So he's and it started the thinking that I got to free these people, and eventually this became an obsession, and eventually he became sort of a self-appointed mythical figure, like I can't find the word now. But he was on a mission to do great things for the Russian people and become great in the process. And that became a one-way street. And he's still on that one-way street, and there's no way around. And at the end of that one-way street, there's a granite wall.
Yes. Well, history will prove that. And the only thing that being on U.S. soil, and just really kind of just living in our little bubble here, the only thing that bothers me sometimes is how interested the United States government is in this war over there. And I just sometimes have to ask, like, why? And what is the interest? And why is it in the news every single day? There's wars going on around the world every day of every week of every month. But yet this one is incredibly important to this administration.
Yeah.
It's just speculation, but what's your take on that? Because that scares me.
You actually can use the attribute racist with some credibility here, because there's a lot of killings going on in Africa, and we don't report on this at all.
No, none.
They're not important to us. Now, the thing is, though, there's a valid interest that we have because Russia has the nuclear weapons. You got to make sure that Russia doesn't get out of hand. And there's one thing that I rarely ever hear: we're not interested in regime change. We want a stable Russia, because if Russia falls apart and becomes sort of an anarchy, you don't know what types of people will get their hands on the nuclear weapons. I know that the Soviet government was not suicidal, and I don't think the Putin government is suicidal. But if you get some religious fanatics to have possession of nuclear weapons, we're toast.
Yeah, I mean that's an ender right there. That's when we're always used to seeing the movies where the end. That's the big the end.
But the thing is, I've never heard anybody. Now, obviously, I don't know that they haven't said it, but this is not in the public realm. We don't want a regime change in Russia. If it comes, it has to come from the inside, and it still has to be handled very carefully, because they have more nukes than we do.
Yes. Yeah, but I think I agree with you, and I don't know enough. I don't know nearly what you do, but it just doesn't seem like Putin and the powers that be over there want to end the world, by pushing a button. It just doesn't seem like that's their motive.
No,
and I hope I'm right.
They want to live. They want to live. But once you got to a point where the tensions are very high, there's also the possibility of an accidental launch. We came close during the Cold War. So it's you can't run around being scared all day. But this is a time where we could be rightfully worried about the future.
Well, you know what? We just gotta sometimes just go about our lives and do good by others, and just focus on what kept you here. Love.
Yeah,
it's a very powerful thing. Well, Jack, this has been amazing. I appreciate you telling us your story and going into, who Jack really is, instead of just what the media wants everybody to know of Jack is the KGB spy that, made it to America and ended up staying. And what do you think of Putin? I was really happy we went this route, because I think your story is fascinating.
I enjoyed the conversation, and of course, I could have predicted that we went long.
A little bit, but that's okay. It was well worth it.
No problem.
You didn't start speaking in German, so that was my cue to know when to end.
But I'm starting to get a little bit tired because I spoke a lot more than you did.
You did.
And my daughter says, I need to really take good care of my last remaining neuron.
That's for sure. Well, we'll end it right on that. Folks, listen, go check out The Agent. Watch the 12-part series. You'll learn a lot about Jack and his story, and it'll be fascinating. So with that being said, Jack, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. It was great talking to you. Take care.
All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. We're putting up tons of them, but I think if you like this one, you'll probably like that video as well.
But we tend to wait until there's a problem before we then react. So we're very reactive instead of proactive. And so my goal has always been, hey, proactive solutions for reactive situations. And so that's what Escape the Wolf has done. That's what the 100 Deadly Skills books have done. And that is without a doubt what Rugged Life is going to do, and get that information out there so that people can get ahead of what potentially could be a bad day.